I'd like to welcome everybody to today's presentation on stopping inflammation from ruining your mental health. I'm your host, Dr. Dawn-Elise Snipes. This is a 1-hour counselor education presentation, and the strategies to reduce inflammation begin about halfway through. So if you're going to watch this on replay, just know you can forward to that part. We're going to talk about what inflammation is and why we have it, because it serves a purpose. Just like anger and anxiety serve a purpose, we just don't want it to run wild in our body. We'll talk about how stress causes inflammation, how inflammation impacts each piece of our life, and how we can reduce inflammation and start living happier. Inflammation itself is a response of the immune system to protect against harmful stimuli such as toxins, pathogens, and damaged cells. When we have inflammation, it tells us something's wrong in our body. We've either got leaky gut, we've got toxins leaking out into our bloodstream, or we came in contact with endocrine disruptors or a variety of other things. But inflammation basically signals that something is wrong. The purpose of inflammation, particularly in its acute form, is to protect the host, us, by containing infection or injury. If you get a tick bite, we all hate those things, or a mosquito bite, it will swell up, and the infection is localized at first, and the swelling, the body is sending immune cells there to try to defeat the pathogen before it becomes systemic. It promotes healing by clearing cellular debris, including excess free radicals or reactive oxygen species. So it helps clear away a lot of that junk that is the byproduct of living. And we know when free radicals build up and they get in excess, then our body can't effectively clear them, and it starts clogging up the works and contributing to aging and inflammation. It recruits immune cells to areas of injury. When you sprain your arm and it swells right up, that's the body sending immune cells there to try to repair the tissues. And it facilitates tissue regeneration. So all of these things are wonderful goals or wonderful duties of inflammation. But just like anger, we don't want it going constantly. We need it to respond when it's necessary and to back off when it's not. Acute inflammation is a short-term response characterized by redness, heat, swelling, pain, and a loss of function, which resolves once the threat is eliminated or the area is healed. We know if you sprain your arm, again, you get acute swelling, but after a couple of days, the swelling goes down. It's not completely healed yet, but the swelling goes down. So that acute inflammation is reducing as those tissues heal. Chronic inflammation is a prolonged and dysregulated response. How many times do we talk about dysregulation in these classes? That can persist for months or years or forever unless it's addressed, contributing to various diseases including diabetes, cardiovascular disease, autoimmune diseases, depression, anxiety, cancer, and even dementia. Chronic stress can be one of our main causes of inflammation. And when we think of stress, I want you to think of stress in each piece of life: physical stress, interpersonal stress, emotional stress, cognitive or mental stress, and environmental stresses like temperatures or exposure to toxins. All of those are stress, and the more stress the body is exposed to, the longer and more frequently the stress response is activated. And when that happens, we start to see problems. So chronic stress leads to sustained activation of the sympathetic nervous system. That's your fight or flight. This stimulates the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines. So the body's under stress, it's under attack. The immune system's triggered and it says, all right, guys, go out there and figure out how to protect us. All right, well, in theory, that makes sense. It also inhibits anti-inflammatory pathways. So when we're under stress, the sympathetic nervous system tells the vagus nerve, be quiet. We need to handle this threat right now, and it's not the time to relax. So it inhibits the vagal nerve and the anti-inflammatory reflex. It decreases vagal tone associated with chronic stress and reduces the body's capacity to downregulate inflammation, leading to persistent immune activation, heightened inflammatory cytokine production, and C-reactive proteins. What we want to get from this, and we talk a lot about balance. We don't want our relaxation nervous system to be too strong, but we don't want our stress response to be too strong. And it's kind of like your bicep and your tricep. If your bicep gets too strong, then the tricep can't resist it, and you can very easily tear your tricep. Same thing with our sympathetic and parasympathetic, or our stress and our relaxation nervous system. When one is activated too long, it gets too strong and it causes the other one to weaken, and it's not able to balance itself out. The relaxation nervous system is not able to jump in and say, hey, things are good, you can go now, because the sympathetic nervous system basically becomes a bully. Systemic inflammation involves the release of pro-inflammatory cytokines into the bloodstream. The word's not as important as pro-inflammatory. So when we're experiencing chronic inflammation, we start to develop systemic inflammation, and we'll talk about how that happens. But systemic inflammation means that we've got inflammation everywhere. It's not just where we sprained our arm. Cytokines, those inflammatory molecules, cross the blood-brain barrier at leaky regions and bind to the receptors in the brain, stimulating the release of corticotropin-releasing hormone. Cytokines, through this process, influence various key brain regions. The amygdala, remember, that's where we do our fear processing. When cytokines are in the brain, when we've got that inflammation going on, you have a heightened fear and threat perception and increased emotional reactivity. You're stressed, you're on edge, you're freaked out, and so you're going to likely be more likely to dysregulate emotionally. You're also probably going to be a lot more hypervigilant. It affects the hippocampus, reducing neurogenesis. So instead of building neurons, we're actually, over the long term, killing off neurons. It impairs memory and regulation of the HPA axis, or the stress response. So when we've got those cytokines going in the body, the stress response is just getting fueled, and the relaxation response is not getting any attention at all. And the prefrontal cortex, that's my favorite part, because that's where we do our wise mind thinking, our executive functioning, our planning, all that stuff. But when you are in fight or flight, when your stress response is activated, for whatever reason, including inflammation, you are not thinking, you are not using that prefrontal cortex. You are in fight or flee. You are in basically emotion-driven or amygdala-driven reacting. So the prefrontal cortex is inhibited, so you have poor decision-making, poor executive functioning, and the top-down regulation of the amygdala is impaired. Top-down means I can feel anxious, but then I can think about it and say, hey, there's really not a reason to be anxious right now. Well, that gets inhibited when there are inflammatory cytokines in the brain. When we've got chronic inflammation, we've got inflammatory cytokines in the brain. We've got neuroinflammation. Cytokines also activate afferent vagus nerve fibers. Now, typically we think of the vagus nerve as our calming nerve, but it actually sends messages back and forth. And those afferent nerve fibers are telling the brain, hey, there's still a stressor outside, and it's not time for me to jump into action yet. You need to get all these cytokines under control. All right, that's the sciencey part of it. How does inflammation impact us physically? Well, it's exhausting. We've seen that inflammation itself, separate from how much time somebody spends in bed, people who have chronic inflammation experience significantly more fatigue on a day-to-day basis. Sleep disruption. Well, if you are experiencing inflammation, that keeps your stress response high, which keeps your cortisol high. When cortisol is high, it prevents the release of melatonin, which impairs your sleep. Even if you're in bed for 10 hours, it may not be restful sleep. So we start seeing problems with people's circadian rhythms and their sleep. We have microbiome changes. The bacteria in the gut that break down all the food so we can send it where it needs to be to make tissues and neurotransmitters and hormones. All right, so the microbes in the gut change. This altered microbial diversity reduces beneficial species of microbes in the gut like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium. That's bad. And even worse, it promotes the growth of pathological microbes, which increase local and systemic inflammation. So the balance of bacteria in the gut starts to switch over to pathological. And I guess the best analogy I can make, we have a pond on our farm. And there are times, especially when the geese are migrating through, that the pond starts to, the microbial balance in the pond starts to become bad, and we start getting a lot of sludge and algae growing in the pond because of all the goose poop. And that's what happens. When you change the microbial diversity, then different things grow, different things are made, different things proliferate. We don't want that. So we do want to help people learn how to rebalance their microbiome. Leaky gut is another physical impact of inflammation. When we are chronically stressed, we have the alteration of our microbiome, and that alters the mucosa in the gut. Part of this alteration of the mucosa is to try to block the pathogens. But when our stress is chronic, we also start seeing the junctures between the cells that make up the gut become looser. So pathogens actually do leak out of the gut. You know, all that stuff that goes into the sewer starts going into your body. And your body recognizes that as a toxin and responds by, drum roll please, increasing inflammation. We also have poor nutritional absorption because of that mucosal block. When the body's trying to contain some of those bad bugga-buggas, like if you've ever gotten a stomach flu or something, it's trying to contain that stuff so it doesn't go out. But that also means it's containing nutrients. Our nutrient absorption is poor. Our nutrient absorption is also poor when we are in fight or flight because our body is not in rest and digest. Our body is in fight or flight, which means that food is either going to sit there like a rock and ferment, or it's going to go through us like nobody's business. Either way, we're not breaking it down effectively and using the nutrients. So people who have chronic inflammation may be eating an extremely healthy diet, but still malnourished because their body is not absorbing the nutrients. This is why even if somebody tells me, oh, I eat a great diet, if they are in my office, if they're complaining of anxiety, if they're in recovery from addiction, if they're in my office, generally I suspect that they've got some underlying systemic inflammation. And one of my first things is, have you gone to the doctor and had a blood test run to see what your nutrient levels are? Vitamin D is huge in helping to manage mood and inflammation. Iron is huge in mood. We have a B12, another one. We have a lot of nutrients that are required for our body to actually use the food we eat. And if we're not absorbing them effectively, then our body is trying to make serotonin without all the tools, without all the components. We also see hormone changes, gonadal hormone changes. Under stress, testosterone, estrogen, progesterone change their levels. Estrogen in the right amounts for that individual is neuroprotective, and it helps prevent brain cells from being lost because of excess stress. But when we have too much estrogen, people tend to start feeling very anxious, and it actually can cause more mood problems. When people get stressed, we know, when women get stressed, we know that we often start to see their circadian cycles get off and their hormone cycles get off as a result of some of these hormone changes. As people age, their hormones naturally drop. Unfortunately, since testosterone and estrogen both can be anti-inflammatory and neuroprotective, as that happens, we start to see more inflammation in older people, which is why there are a lot of people who take hormone replacement therapy. There are a lot of other people who take different supplements to try to help bolster the anti-inflammatory ability of their body. We see neurotransmitter alterations. As I mentioned earlier, when you have stress, you've got the stress neurotransmitters that are being called into play. When that happens for long enough, you start to see tolerance to those hormones and neurotransmitters like dopamine and norepinephrine and cortisol. The body just starts saying, no, we've been doing this for too long, we're tired. So the neurotransmitters start losing their ability to help the individual feel excited, help the individual have any energy. We see increased aging via the production of free radicals. The more revved your body is, the harder it's working, the more junk, byproducts, reactive oxygen species that we are producing. And I want you to think of it like a factory. And when people are in a factory, they're making stuff and they have, all of the packaging that the parts came in, and the packaging piles up. Well, in a healthy system, when the inflammation stops, when the stressor stops, then the cleaning crew comes in and clears out all of the packaging. In the body, they clear out all of the free radicals. But if too many free radicals are being produced for the body to be able to effectively clear them out, or if there never is a relaxation place where the cleaning crew can come in, the factory's just going to run 24/7, then we start seeing the buildup of free radicals. And that contributes a lot to our aging process because the body can't clear out the debris, if you will. We see neuroinflammation and neurotoxicity when we are in fight or flight for too long. When cortisol stays high, glutamate stays high, norepinephrine stays high, it creates what I refer to as a hot environment in the brain. We are, running, we are on. And when that happens for too long, the neurons in your brain aren't meant to be constantly bathed in stress chemicals. And when they are, they start dying. That's no other word for it. They start dying. We start seeing evidence of neurotoxicity and brain shrinkage. The beauty is your brain can heal. Your brain can heal no matter how old you are. Now, there are some things you can't totally heal from, but you can create an environment that promotes neurogenesis, that promotes the development of new neurons. Those are just basically tissues that the immune system helps rebuild once the neurotoxicity is down. We also see insulin resistance and increased A1C levels. When the stress response kicks off, for whatever reason, when the stress response kicks off, cortisol is released, and it triggers the release of glucose from the liver to give you energy to fight or flee. If you are constantly triggering more and more glucose to be released from your liver, then you are going to start to develop problems getting your muscles to uptake that blood glucose. Your insulin receptors are going to start becoming resistant. So you're going to end up building up a lot of sugar in your blood because it doesn't have anywhere to go, which leads to eventually increased A1C, prediabetes, and diabetes. High levels of blood sugar are inflammatory. Emotionally, inflammation does have an impact. As I mentioned earlier, when we are in fight or flight, those inflammatory cytokines that are in our brain actually make us more likely to emotionally dysregulate because they are impacting the amygdala. They're telling the amygdala there's a threat out there, and they're impacting the prefrontal cortex, which we often use to downregulate our amygdala and say, amygdala, everything's okay, just take a chill pill. Well, in this case, not so much. The prefrontal cortex is shut down and the amygdala is on overdrive. So when we get stressed, we don't just get a little stressed, we get a lot of stressed. We see increased anxiety and increased depression. This is just, it is. There are study after study after study after study that show that people with higher inflammatory cytokine levels in their body have higher levels of anxiety and depression. And people with anxiety and depression often develop or have higher cytokine levels. So it's chicken or egg. We don't know necessarily what kicked it off, but we do know that by reducing inflammatory cytokines, we can help improve the symptoms of anxiety and depression. People who have chronic stress, chronic systemic inflammation, and remember, stress is not just emotional. It can be physical stress like chronic pain, exhibit reduced motivation and dopamine when they're chronically under stress, just like people who have addictions. Their dopaminergic system is getting bombarded with dopamine a lot, and it's stressful. Addiction is stressful on the body. Withdrawal is stressful on the body. It's just stressful all around. But the dopaminergic receptors start to become resistant. They start to say, you know what? No. If you want me to get excited, you're going to have to give me more than that. Which means that people exhibit a lot of reduced motivation. Dopamine is our, I want to do that again, neurochemical. It's our motivation neurochemical. When we do something that's positive for our survival, as a result of dopamine, then endogenous opioids or endorphins are released and give us that warm, fuzzy feeling. And then we're like, oh yeah, I want to do that again. And a lot of people experience guilt when they have chronic inflammation because, and it's not a direct cause or directly influenced by inflammation, but because of all these other symptoms. They're tired all the time. Their libido's out of whack. They have chronic pain. They get sick more often. There are a lot of things that happen that make it more difficult to live their rich and meaningful life. And they may start feeling guilty that they are, because they feel like they're not holding up their end of relationships. Cognitively, people with chronic inflammation have brain fog. You don't get good quality sleep, you're going to have brain fog. If the brain doesn't have time or the ability to clear out the adenosine that builds up throughout the day, you're going to have brain fog. If you've got neuroinflammation, you've got those cytokines in your brain and all those neurons are inflamed, they're not going to fire as effectively and you're going to have brain fog. We can't immediately eliminate brain fog, but there are a lot of things we can do to help people cope with it in order to reduce stress related to their brain fog. Give them a little bit more time so they don't get frustrated and angry because they're so foggy. People with inflammation, systemic inflammation, have more hypervigilance and attention deficits. It makes sense. When you're in fight or flight, you're like that little rabbit that is trying not to get eaten. So you're stressed. You're going to be looking around for the lions that are coming to eat me. And if I'm scanning for something that's coming to hurt me, then I'm not going to be able to focus on things that I, quote, want to focus on. So we start seeing hypervigilance and attention deficits. We also see working memory impairment. Makes sense. If you're having problems focusing on things, then when somebody tells you something, you may remember it for half a second, but then you forget that what you take into your brain just kind of goes in one ear and out the other. The brain is not dedicating energy to learning things, to remembering things. Remember that prefrontal cortex, it's off duty when we have a lot of stress. People experience cognitive rigidity, which means they have more difficulty solving problems and getting out of the box. This is how I do it. This is how I've always done it, and I can't even fathom any other way to solve the problem. Or this is my perception. This is what I think is right, and I just I don't have the energy to consider other alternatives, which makes people feel very stuck. And we see a lot of cognitive rigidity in people where it's scary to even think about considering other options. And it makes it more difficult for them to interact with others to solve problems, because if the way they are doing it doesn't work, they're at a loss. We also see secondary effects, negativity. Well, think about it. If you're not feeling well, if you're dysregulating, if you're exhausted, you have difficulty learning and remembering things from moment to moment, it's easy to start feeling very pessimistic, very hopeless, very helpless. And in terms of interpersonally and environmentally, all of this reduces our desire to interact with others. And because the person tends to be more emotionally reactive and more hypervigilant, it also may contribute to more conflict in their relationships, because they've got a shorter fuse. They've got less patience. And then they feel guilty because they had less patience. So it's frustrating. As a result, a lot of people with chronic inflammation tend to withdraw. They're exhausted. They just don't have the motivation. And the relationships they have often are somewhat conflictual. Additionally, people with chronic inflammation are easily overstimulated. And I don't mean just mentally overstimulated. I mean every type of sense can be overstimulated. The persistent activation of the immune pathways and the stress response can lead to increased neural excitability and sensitivity. And hypervigilance, when you're in fight or flight, it reduces sensory gating. Sensory gating is our body's ability to shut out irrelevant stimuli, to tolerate different things. But when we are hypervigilant, we're just getting bombarded by smells, by sounds, by touches, by everything. And it can get overwhelming really, really quickly. Additionally, not only are we being bombarded constantly, but those neurons are even more excitable and more sensitive. Think about if you rub your arm really fast for a few minutes, eventually it starts getting sore. You're doing the same thing. You're not rubbing it any harder. You haven't changed anything, but those neurons are excited. They're stimulated, and continuing to stimulate them more is more painful, is more overwhelming. Therefore, we also need to consider people's environment. So let's move on to tools to reduce inflammation, tools to heal. As I mentioned before class started, there are some things like trauma that there are no easy fixes for. But if you can reduce unnecessary stress and reduce unnecessary inflammation, then you free up energy to be able to deal with those other things that are creating chronic stress and inflammation. And once you deal with those, then, hey, you're starting to peel away the layers of that onion, if you will. Physical strategies to reduce inflammation, your circadian rhythms. Your circadian rhythms regulate your hormones, your neurotransmitters, just about every function in your body. And when they get out of whack, it throws the entire body factory into chaos and is stressful. It triggers the stress response. Circadian rhythms are set by your routine your light, your temperature, and your cortisol levels. So having something of a daily routine is very helpful for setting your circadian rhythms. Having light, especially blue light, reduced 2 hours before bed, very helpful. Cooling the temperatures when you're ready to sleep, that helps you sleep better. And reducing cortisol. Please don't get on social media. Don't watch a show that's going to stress you out. Don't start emailing people if it's going to stress you out, or paying bills right before bed. That gets your cortisol up, which inhibits your body's ability to release melatonin and help you get good quality sleep. You may still fall asleep, but it's going to be crappy sleep. Which takes us to sleep. Having a sleep routine, in addition to your regular daily routine, having a sleep routine can be helpful. Having 2 or 3 things you do every night right before bed that your body says, oh, I know when I do this, that it's getting ready to be time for bed. With little kids, we do it all the time. They come home from school, they play, they come in, they eat dinner, they take a bath, you read them a book, and they're off to dreamland. Try to do something similar for yourself. Keep the temperature cool, somewhere between 62 and 72 degrees, whatever feels comfortable for you. Reduce your fluids 2 to 4 hours before bed, depending on your bladder. You don't want to be waking up 2-3 times a night to have to go to the bathroom. So reducing your fluids, sucking on ice chips or something in the evening if you start to get thirsty, but making sure you're hydrating throughout the rest of the day can help a lot. If you've got prostate issues, take it up with your doctor. And you want to eliminate disruptors, anything that's going to wake you up in the night. If you've got allergies, try to get the allergens out of your room. Use a HEPA filter. Don't let the cat sleep on the bed. Noises. And this can include your neighbors or even your partner. If your partner snores like a freight train, you're going to have to figure out how to deal with that, especially if they've got apnea, because they've found that people who live with someone, who sleep with someone who's got sleep apnea, tend to get much worse sleep because they're waking up periodically as their partner wakes up. So addressing that noise, whether it's earplugs or white noise or brown noise or yellow noise, I guess it's brown or pink noise, anything that can help you sleep through the night is good. Reduce as much light as possible, especially blue light, but as much light as possible. And this includes the beautiful moon. If it's a full moon and it's just shining in your window bright as day, it confuses your body a little bit. So try to reduce as much light as possible. If you feel comfortable enough to wear a sleep mask, then great. And ruminations. This is another disruptor. Your brain gets going and you start thinking about something. I got to remember to do this tomorrow, or I need to do that tomorrow, or you start ruminating over something that happened that day. Keep a notepad by your bed, or if you do better with, recording it, keep your device by your bed so you can do an audio recording. So you're getting it out of your head and somewhere where your brain can say, okay, I know that I don't have to remember that because it's written down. I'll see it in the morning. It sounds weird, but it actually helps your brain relax if it is confident that you're going to remember that in the morning. And I know I'm talking like your brain has a life of its own, and it kind of does, but it's very helpful for many people to just jot things down. If you're going to use a notepad, try to have a light by your bed that's a red light, just like they use in movie theaters. A red light is less likely to disrupt your circadian rhythms. Nutrition, and somebody had asked about this before class started, about sugar. When we eat highly processed foods, when we eat sugary foods, it spikes our blood sugar. When we spike our blood sugar, that's a stressor. It contributes to inflammation. That's why we encourage people to eat a diet that is a low glycemic index, so you're not spiking your blood sugar all the time. Does it mean you can't ever have sugar? No, Most people are not going to do that, but there are ways to balance it out. So if you're going to have something that's sugary, also combine it with something that's got fiber and preferably fat and protein, because those are much more slowly digested and it tempers the sugar release. It's not the total solution, but if you're determined to eat sugar, then talk with a dietitian or a nutritionist about ways to temper your blood sugar spike. Anti-inflammatory and pro and prebiotic diet is really important. Anti-inflammatory means reducing as much processed food as possible, eating things that are whole grains, whole foods like apples as opposed to apple juice. Those are really helpful. You also want to eat things that are colorful. I encourage people to have 3 colors on their plate at every meal. Condiments and desserts don't count. Green, blue, yellow, brown, white. There are a lot of infographics online about eating by color, and each color actually has different chemicals in it that act as antioxidants and anti-inflammatories in different ways, which is why you want different colors. You don't want to only eat green stuff. Green, blue, red, yellow, all great for you. And those rich colors, the richer the color, basically, the more anti-inflammatory and antioxidant power it has in general. So focusing on trying to get some of those foods in your diet. Probiotic foods are basically foods that are high in fiber, whether it's beans or apples or inulin. There are a lot of different probiotics, but those fibers go through your gut, go through your stomach, down to your gut where it nourishes the bacteria. The bacteria in your gut actually feed on those fermented fibers. And prebiotics are the fibers. Probiotics are your yogurts and your fermented foods. Yogurts, kimchi, all of those different things. Kefir, love those things. They are great probiotic foods. And then intermittent fasting is very helpful for addressing insulin resistance. Some people can't do it. And because of the way they're wired, because of conditions they have, obviously it's something you want to talk to your doctor about. But intermittent fasting, even if you're only doing 12-hour eating window and a 12-hour fasting window, does wonders for giving your body a break. And if it's not secreting blood sugar for 12 hours, that really gives your system a break and gives those receptors a break from being bombarded. You want to balance the autonomic nervous system. The autonomic nervous system is comprised of the parasympathetic, your relaxation response, and the sympathetic, your stress response. One of the best ways to do this is to improve vagal tone. Most people, if not all, with chronic inflammation have a overly strong sympathetic nervous system, an overly strong stress response. So they need to strengthen their relaxation response, which means they need to manually, if you will, or intentionally trigger that vagus nerve and downregulate. You can do this through interval training. You can even do it very simply without, pushing yourself. Get up, go on a walk around your yard, around your office, walk up and down the stairs a couple of times. Then sit down and practice breathing in for 4, hold for 4, exhale for 4, hold for 4. And notice how quickly your heart rate goes down. You can also use devices that stimulate the vagus nerve when you're feeling stressed. I have one right here that I'm actually going to do a video on later. And it's a transcutaneous nerve stimulation unit. It's got 2 little electrodes here. When you turn it on and you put it against the vagus nerve, it stimulates the vagus nerve and actually stimulates the relaxation response. Pain management. Move with moderation. If you have a lot of pain, then obviously don't go running a 5K. But movement is helpful because our body is not meant to be static. And when we are static for a while, anybody who's ever been on bed rest can tell you, you start to hurt. You start to get achy. Heck, even if you're flying, my daughter's getting ready to fly to California, and that's like a 4.5 hour flight or something. And I'm thinking, I can't imagine sitting still for 4.5 hours. I'd be ready to crawl out of my seat. So movement can be helpful. Get those joints moving through their range of motion. You don't have to use weights, nothing. Just get the joints moving through the range of motion. That can help. Earthing, as we talked about a couple of weeks ago, actually has been shown in multiple studies to reduce systemic inflammation and help balance a lot of the blood parameters and immune system parameters that are out of whack in people with chronic inflammation. You can do earthing by going outside barefoot for 15, 20 minutes a day. Or there are earthing mats that you can get that you can put under your desk and plug them into a grounded outlet, put your bare feet on them, and it does the same sort of thing. Basically, it's allowing nature, the natural electrical conductivity of nature, to enter your body, and the negative electrons are negated or canceled out by the positive electrons. So those free radicals are eliminated. Massage is also good for pain management. Whether you use a percussive massager or you go get a massage, it can be helpful. You are helping bring circulation to that area. You're helping heal the area. If you had a particularly hard workout, you're helping get the lactic acid, which is essentially a toxin, out of the area. So there are a lot of benefits of massage for people. And stretching, gentle stretching, can help with pain management. When you have an imbalance in your muscles, I have scoliosis, so one part of my back is way stronger than the other part of my back, and it pulled the spine out of alignment, which causes pain. We see the same thing if you've got imbalances between your front and back muscles, or between different sides of your body. If one side of your abdomen is stronger and it's pulling all this, and then this side's kind of leaning over, you're going to start to feel pain. So stretching to get that natural balance is effective, but do it slowly, do it gradually, and don't do it till it hurts. Hormone balancing, including estrogen, testosterone, and thyroid, is very, very helpful. And that's something you need to talk over with your doctor. If you're not down for hormone replacement therapy, a lot of people aren't, that's fine. It's just one option. Thyroid hormones are also implicated, however, in inflammation. If you have chronic inflammation, there's a greater than average chance you probably have hypothyroid, which is going to contribute to the fatigue and the low mood and a lot of the other symptoms. Inter and intrapersonal strategies. A lot of people who have chronic inflammation have a really obnoxious inner critic. They have low self-esteem and they're constantly telling themselves they're not good enough. And we need to get that under control. How can you feel safe? How can you relax when you're not even safe in your own body, in your own head? So developing a sense of safety by combating that inner critic. Telling it it's not true. If you hear what it says, ask yourself, who said that? Is that something that I believe, or is that something somebody told me? Write down what your inner critic says and rewrite it in a healthier way. There are a lot of ways to deal with the inner critic, and I have videos on doing just that. Practice CARES with yourself to develop secure attachment. CARES, if you remember, stands for consistency, attention, responsiveness, encouragement, and safety. So often we're focused on other people and stuff out there and just putting one foot in front of the other, we're not focusing on doing what we need to do to take care of ourselves. We are not consistently mindful, and we are not consistently responsive. Sometimes when we're sick, we may take the day off and say, I'm sick, I need to rest, I need to recover. Other times when we're sick, we may say, well, I guess I got to suck it up and push on through. That's inconsistent. Taking care of yourself needs to be a consistent priority. So consistency, attention, spend time with yourself, get to know yourself. A lot of times we're so stuck in autopilot doing, get up, eat breakfast, go to work, come home, eat dinner, take a shower, go to bed, rinse and repeat. That we lose touch with the things that we like, with the things that we're interested in, with the things that are important in our rich and meaningful life. So spend time with yourself periodically. I tell people every day, and sometimes they look at me cockeyed. All right, set aside some time each week. If you can't do it every day or you won't do it every day, set aside time each week to pay attention to yourself and do something that you enjoy. Be responsive to your needs. When you are emotionally upset, when you're feeling abandoned, when you are exhausted, when you're in pain, whatever it is, being responsive. Heck, when you're in a good mood, respond to that and go, hey, I am having a great day today. This feels awesome. Be encouraging with yourself instead of pessimistic. Encourage yourself to focus on the things you can control. And safety means being a safe home base for yourself. When you screw up or you fail at something, you are not a failure. You made a mistake or you failed at something, but you are not a failure. So loving yourself, even when you're imperfect, creates a safe environment in your own head. Process relationships and other people's behaviors in the present in terms of FitCat, the facts in this context at this time. A lot of times people in our present do things that remind us of people from our past and maybe unpleasant people from our past. And instead of evaluating people based on the facts in this context at this time, we assume that since this person back here was unpleasant when they did something similar, we assume that this person is also a threat to us. Not always true. Not always true. Develop a support system of people you can trust. And that takes a while to figure out, how do I trust people, and to develop that system. That's okay. Setting those boundaries, think of it like a house. People you don't know or you don't trust, you're not going to let into your house. You're going to talk to them through the screen door, or may not even open the door, but talk to them through the screen door. Once you start to trust them or get to know them a little bit, you may let them come into the foyer, but you're not going to let them go wandering around your house. Once you feel comfortable with them, eventually you may invite them in for coffee, to sit down and talk, what have you. So you're gradually establishing that trust. So I want you to think about maybe like the UPS person. And initially you're probably not going to be like, hey, UPS person, why don't you come in and have coffee with me? And oh, by the way, can you watch my house this weekend? That'd be weird. You don't trust that person that much. But so think about, what would it take for you to move to a level of trust with that UPS person eventually, where you had them watching your house over the weekend? And maybe think of a new neighbor. UPS person is probably a weird example, but think of a new neighbor. You're not immediately going to be giving them your house keys. You're not maybe even immediately going to be inviting them in. Practice compassion and forgiveness for yourself and others. Compassion means recognizing you are doing the very best you can. Today may not be an A-Day, but you are doing the very best you can with what you've got going on based in the facts in this context at this time. Okay, that's compassion, and other people probably are too. Trying not to spend a lot of energy being judgmental of others and getting angry at them, because that's a stress response. Being compassionate and saying, all right, they're doing the best they can. Would I like them to do better? Yeah, but compassionately, they're probably doing their very, very best. and forgiving yourself. You're going to screw up. Other people are going to screw up. You need to decide, is it worth holding on to this anger and this stress and this inflammation over this thing, or do I need to let it go? Now, that doesn't mean saying all's well. That means saying, I am choosing not to hold on to this anger and stress. I'm choosing to learn from this situation. I'm going to use my energy to learn from it so it doesn't happen again. And then I'm going to move forward. I'm not going to stay stuck here. And banish shame by separating your worth as a person from what you think makes you unlovable. Shame is different than guilt. Guilt is anger at ourselves for something we did that we shouldn't have done or didn't do that we should have done. Shame is a feeling about our worth as a human being, about our lovability. If I'm ashamed, then it means I feel like I am unlovable for some reason. So separate, what you think makes you unlovable and really evaluate whether it's guilt or shame and explore what makes you lovable as a person. Emotional strategies, happiness. Even minor instances of happiness or contentment have been shown to reduce inflammatory hormones and inflammatory neurotransmitters. We can engage happiness with behavioral activation. I have an entire playlist on YouTube of videos that just make me laugh. Some of them are comedians, some of them are babies just sitting there laughing hysterically. Whatever it is that makes you laugh. When I'm having a really bad day, I will pull up one of those. Does it make me laugh? Not always, but it generally brings at least a little smirk to my face. And even that little smirk is evidence of release of some of those relaxation hormones. So do something every day, not just when you're upset, but do something every day that promotes happiness or contentment. Gratitude has also been shown to help reduce inflammation because when people are feeling grateful, they are often focusing on the things that they do have and the things that they are in control of instead of the things that they don't have and the things that are out of their control. Practicing mindfulness on a daily basis, a couple of times a day, can be really helpful for developing gratitude and recognizing what you do have in the moment, which can be very empowering. Awe and wonder are two other emotions that we don't talk about a lot, but we have these moments like when you see a double rainbow after a storm and you're just like, wow. Or we had a deer in our yard the other day that gave birth to twins, and deer don't usually give birth to twins. And it was just awe-inspiring to see these two little teeny tiny babies that really aren't that much bigger than my daughter's terrier out in the yard. I mean, they're just adorable. But that's a sense of awe, like how amazing is this that it even happened? And when people develop a sense of awe, when people experience that, when you look at the Grand Canyon and you're just struck by the awe of what must have happened to create that, it has been shown to actually kind of rewire some of those stress chemicals. Anger and anxiety, we don't want to get rid of them. We just don't want to nurture them. Anger and anxiety tell us that there might be a threat. Okay, well, thanks for letting me know. Now I'm going to choose to use my energy instead of stewing in it and nurturing it. I'm going to use my energy to identify the feeling, explore the triggers and the facts in this context at this time, determine the best response, and act accordingly. And the mnemonic for that is IDEA. Identify the feeling, explore the triggers and the facts, determine the best response, and act accordingly. And can't leave this slide without talking about guilt. Guilt is self-anger. And shoulda, coulda, wouldas will keep you stressed until the cows come home. You can't change what happened. You can't change the past. And holding on to guilt is just keeping you stuck in that past. It's keeping you hooked to that mistake you made. Do you want to stay hooked to that mistake, stay tethered to it, or do you want to learn from it, use your energy to learn from it and move on and have compassion for yourself and say, well, I made a bad choice. I did something wrong. I did something horrible, whatever it is. And I'm learning from it. I'm becoming a better version of me, and I'm not going to do it anymore. Hardiness is defined as being committed to the things that are important in your rich and meaningful life, all of the things, recognizing that life is more than just one thing, recognizing the things that you can and cannot control, and focusing your energy on the things that you can control and the things that you do have in your rich and meaningful life, and viewing things that happen as challenges instead of obstacles or barriers. They are challenges. How can I deal with this? It's a challenge to figure out, how can I reduce my inflammation today? I know, kind of an odd challenge, but it's a challenge. Address your unhelpful thoughts, or in cognitive behavioral therapy, we call them cognitive distortions, with one of these 4 strategies. FitCat, evaluate your beliefs against the facts in this context at this time. A lot of times we are assuming, we're jumping to conclusions, we're using emotional reasoning. So looking at the facts in this context at this time can be helpful. Examine the difference, or recognize the difference between probability and possibility. There's a possibility I could win the lottery. Is that probable? No, not at all. Look for alternate explanations. Instead of jumping to conclusions or personalizing things, what are 3 other explanations why this might be going on besides me, or besides this bad thing that I'm assuming is going on? And look for exceptions to extremes. Most things don't happen always or never. So looking for exceptions to extremes. This person is always truthful and the nicest person you will ever meet. Well, is that true? Maybe it's true. But my guess is they probably told a little white lie sometime. Or this person is perfect. I don't know. Look for exceptions. Especially if you're trying to compare yourself to them, which is probably not a good idea anyway. Recognizing that everybody has flaws. None of us is perfect. Use guided imagery for pain, redirecting your attention from where the pain is to something else, whether it is, a different body part or something that you're listening to. Emotional distress. You can use guided imagery to basically take a brief vacation. If you are dealing with emotional distress and you need to switch over to, thinking about your favorite vacation place that you're going to go to next year, it gives your brain a break. And it says, okay, this thing over here is stressful. It's not going away, but I need to check out for a few minutes. And it lets your stress hormones go down. And it actually, if you're thinking of something that makes you happy, prompts the release of some of those happy hormones. And cognitive overload, when you're just feeling completely overloaded, sometimes it's best to just take a mental vacation for 5 minutes, get regrouped, and then start again. If you're feeling overloaded, if you've got brain fog, use notifications, push notifications, use lists, write things down. Don't rely on memory when your memory's not all that it should be right now. That's just setting yourself up for distress. Write it down. No shame in it. And use a stress box. When you have stressful thoughts or there's something that's bugging you, write it down, put it in your stress box. You can deal with it later, unless it's something obviously that you have to deal with right then, but rarely is it. Write down whatever's stressing you out, put it in that stress box, and then set aside 30 minutes a day or an hour a week, whatever you want, to go through the things in that stress box and see if they're worth your energy. Finally, environmentally, pay attention to your ergonomics. If you're sitting in uncomfortable positions, you're going to create imbalances in your muscles. You're going to create pain. Same thing in your sleeping environment. You can use feng shui to increase feelings of safety. They've shown that people have underlying levels of stress when they can't see or when they're unaware of what's going on behind them. So either sit with your back kind of against a wall or put mirrors up so you can see what's going on around you and behind you. Also, positioning furniture so you feel like you can easily move throughout a room and you feel like you can see all of the entrances and exits of the doors. Aromatherapy can be very helpful. Bring nature indoors. We know that plants exude things called terpenes that help improve mood and reduce inflammation. Consider sound, modifying the sound in your environment with music that you like, or adding white, pink, or brown noise to help eliminate some of the sounds you don't want to hear. Add colors, pictures, or just sights, whatever you can put that your eyes can latch onto that makes you feel happy, that makes you feel empowered, that makes you feel energized or even calm. And pick a temperature that works for you. If you are too cold or too hot, it triggers the stress response. So trying to keep yourself temperate at all times is important at regulating the stress response and reducing unnecessary inflammation. Chronic stress in any piece of life will contribute to systemic inflammation that worsens chronic stress and aging. And chronic stress will worsen systemic inflammation. Reducing inflammation improves hormone and neurotransmitter balance, the gut microbiome, balance of the autonomic nervous system, all of which contribute to symptom improvement. Identify sources of stress or distress in each piece of your life: physical, interpersonal, emotional, cognitive, and environmental, and make a goal to reduce at least one per week. So by the end of the year, you'll have reduced 52 sources of stress in your life.